Hello, everyone. Welcome to the third lecture in the Shakespearean studies. Today, we're going to talk about Julius Caesar by William Shakespeare. So here we go. First of all, let me talk about William Shakespeare biography. William Shakespeare, born on 26th April 1564, was an English poet, playwright, and actor, widely regarded as the greatest writer in English language and the world's preeminent dramatist. He is often called England's national poet. His extant works, including some of collaboration, consist of about 38 plays, 154 sonnets, 2 long narrative poems, and a few other verses, the authorship of some of which is uncertain. His plays have been translated into every major living language and are performed more often than those of any other playwright. Shakespeare was born and brought up in east of London. At the age of 18, he married Anne, with whom had 3 children, Susanna and twins Hamnet and Judith. Between 1585 and 1592, he began a successful career in London as an actor, writer, and a part owner of a playing company called the Lord Chamberlain Men, later known as a Kingsman. He appears to have retired to Stratford around 1613 at the age of 49, where he did 3 years later. His career Shakespeare produced most of his known work between 1589 and 1613. His early plays were mainly comedies and histories, genres he raised to the peak of sophistication and the artistry by the end of the 16th century. The tragedy of Julius Caesar, also known simply as Julius Caesar, is a tragedy by William Shakespeare, believed to have been written in 1599. It portrays the 44 BC conspiracy against the Roman dictator Julius Caesar, his assassination, and the defeat of the conspirators at the Battle of Philippi. It is one of the several Roman plays that Shakespeare wrote, based on true events from Roman history, which also include Antony and Cleopatra. Although the title of the play is Julius Caesar, Caesar is not central character in its action. He appears in only 3 scenes and is killed at the beginning of the 3rd act. This novel gives basic information about who Julius Caesar was, a Roman dictator that gets stabbed and comes back as a ghost to taunt Brutus of what? The play that Julius Caesar is in is the tragedy of Julius Caesar of where? Ancient Rome. Toward the end of the Roman Republic is where the play is set. It was written in 1599. Descriptions of the main characters. Caponia, born 75 BC, daughter of Lucius Caponius Piso, Caesonius, and sister of Lucius Caponius Piso, a Roman woman, and a third and the last wife of Julius Caesar, the great-granddaughter of lieutenant of Lucius Caseus Longinus, whose name was Lucius Piso. Brutus, noble heritage. Brutus is a Roman nobleman, as was his father of sincere. Brutus truly believes that his role in the assassination of Caesar is for the good of Rome, honest. He refuses to take bribe, naive. He believes in the essential goodness of those around him, philosophical. His philosophies guide his actions and decisions. Caseus envious. Caseus has contempt for Caesar and envies Caesar's possession fearful. Caseus is afraid that Caesar has ambition to be king. He fears what might become of Rome in such an instance. Politically smart, he advises Brutus to assassinate Antony along with Caesar. Understanding what can happen, he advises Brutus not to allow Antony to speak at Caesar's funeral. Corrupt, Prior to the battle at Philippi, he is accused by Brutus of taking bribes, military strategist. His battle plan for Philippi is well thought out and based on sound military principles. Mark Antony, loyal to Caesar. Antony loved and admired Caesar clever. Antony pretends to befriend the conspirators and asks that he be allowed to speak at Caesar's funeral. A skilled orator, Antony's speech at Caesar's funeral sways the crowd. A skilled military leader, Antony has an equal voice in planning the war against the legions of Brutus and Caseus. Julius Caesar, July 100 BC to 15 March 44 BC. Just story of the tribunes. Marvelous and Flavius break up a gathering of Roman citizens who seeks to celebrate Julius Caesar's triumphant return from war. The victory is marked by public games in which Caesar's friend, Mark Antony, takes part. On his way to arena, Caesar is stopped by a stranger who warns that he should beware the ideas of March. Fellow senators Caseus and Marcus Brutus are suspicious of Caesar's reaction to the power he holds in the Republic. They fear he will accept offers to become emperor. Caseus, a successful general himself, is jealous, while Brutus has a more balanced view of the political position. Caseus, Casca, and their allies visit Brutus at night to persuade him of their views, and they plan Caesar's death. Brutus is troubled, but will not disclose to his devoted wife, Portia. On the 15th March, Caesar is urged not to go to the Senate by his wife, Caponia, who has had dreams that he will be murdered, and she fears the signs of the overnight storms. He is nevertheless persuaded by flattery to go, and as petitioners surrounded him, Caesar is stabbed and dies as Brutus gives the final blow. Against Caseus' advice, Mark Antony is allowed by Brutus to speak a funeral oration in the marketplace after Brutus has addressed the people of Rome to explain the conspirators' reasons and their fears for Caesar's ambition. Brutus calms the crowd, but Antony's speech stirs them to writing, and the conspirators are forced to flee from the city. Brutus and Caseus gather an army in northern Greece and prepare to fight the forces led by Mark Antony, who has joined with Caesar's great-nephew Octavius and with Lepidus. Away from Rome, Brutus and Caseus are filled with doubts about future, and they quarrel bitterly over the sites they prepare to engage Antony's army at Philippi. Brutus stoically receives news of his wife's suicide in Rome, but he sees Caesar's ghost as he rests, unable to sleep on the eve of the conflict. In the Battle of Republicans, at first appears to be winning, but when his messenger horse seems to be overtaken by enemy, Caseus fears the worst and gets his servant Pandarus to help him to a quick death. Brutus, finding Caseus' body, commits suicide as the only honorable action left to him. Antony, triumphant on the battlefield, praises Brutus as the noblest Roman of them all and orders a formal funeral before Octavius returned to rule in Rome. Psychology of Persuasion in Julius Caesar by Shakespeare. Shakespeare, in all his complexity, was an excellent psychoanalyst. He probes deep into the human psyche and brings out those applicable factors which make people commit sins of commission and omission. There seems to be an implicit rule ever since Freud's earliest papers. If one wants to establish oneself as an important psychoanalytic scholar, one simply has to write a piece on interpretation of Shakespeare. Many of his characters are victims neither by choice nor by chance, but by being persuaded to bring achievement to the very desire in their unconscious. Good men do limitless harms from the best possible motive, as seen in many Shakespearean plays. Julius Caesar is one of the Shakespeare's most majestic works and the greatest histories in which he deals excitingly with the themes of power and conscience. Shakespeare has in this play shown the same penetration into political characters and the spring of public events as into those of everyday life, says William Hazlitt. As seen in many of his dramas, the play revolves around the difference between man and man, between action and reaction, and between reason and treason. Set in the turbulent days of ancient Rome, this play is renowned for its memorable characters and political intrigue and has been captivating audiences and readers since it was first presented more than 400 years ago. The central issue of the play revolved around the threat to the opportunity for political service through the takeover of power by Caesar. This is a political, mature Rome with a sophisticated culture and a proud history. We see a self conscious Rome, a society aware of its past and as living organism. The play opens with a celebration of Caesar's latest victory, but he has triumphed over Romans, not foreigners. Flavius and Marullus immediately introduces us to the world of political conflict. Their dialogue reveals that Caesar is hated and feared, but the common people are unreflecting. Those who formerly cheated Pompey now celebrated Caesar's triumph over Pompey's sons. The story is put in motion as Caseus stays behind when his close friend Brutus says he is not in the right spirit to celebrate this victory. In order to elicit what is going on in Brutus' mind, Caseus gently persuades him to speak out what bothers him now. He accuses Brutus for keeping distance and for not being his usual loving self. Brutus assures him that his behavior has nothing to do with his feelings for his friends, but with an internal battle. Cassius sets the ball rolling by making hay while the sun shines. While they hear the sounds of trumpets and shouting, Brutus says his fears Caesar has been made king. Caseus makes the most of this comment, probing deep into what makes Brutus fear instead of cheer Caesar being crowned. He then launches into his reasoning on how Caesar has unjustly become a powerful figure. Caseus focuses on two specific strategies to weaken Brutus' devotion to Caesar and to prompt Brutus' sense of civic responsibility. He uses contradictions and juxtapositions, beginning with stories of Caesar's physical weakness and describe how he saved Caesar when he nearly drowned. He then questions how Caesar has any more right to greatness in Brutus or Caseus. Further in walking history, a skilled practice by persuaders, Caseus recalls another Brutus who helped to establish the Republic of Rome. He also resorts to extreme flattery in order to persuade Brutus to enter into action against Caesar. The ambitious Caesar climbs up the ladder of advancement, which is composed of lowliness. His inferiors, the base degrees of men whom he is at first willing to look in the face, but on whom he turns his back, when he has gotten to the top. Implicitly, Brutus figures as one of those base degrees by which Caesar attains the topmost round. It is this vision of being trampled on by Caesar that enables Brutus to get to the end of his soliloquy to fashion its thus, even though he has to admit that the quarrel will bear no color for the thing he is, to make the leap beyond logic and prove to kill Caesar. Well, persuasion is everywhere, playing an essential role in politics, religion, psychotherapy, education, and day-to-day social interactions. The most common target of persuasion, as seen in psychological literature, is a person attitudes. Attitudes refer to general evaluations people have regarding other people, places, objects, and issues. Attitudes are studied as the primary objects of influence because of their presumed guiding influence on choice and action. That is, all things being equal, people will decide to buy the product they like the most, attend the university they evaluate most favorably, and vote for the candidate they approve of most strongly. Persuasive attempts are likely to be effective to the extent that the function of, or reason for holding, the possession outlined in the appeal matches the function underlying recipient attitudes. Psychological reading reveals that for people who are generally sensitive to the social consequences of their behavior, for example, high self-monitors, appeals that emphasize the social adjustive functions of voting. For example, enhancing one's attractiveness to others elicited more favorable evaluations and greater attitude change than appeals that emphasize its value expressive functions. For people who rely on inner disposition, for example, low self monitors, appeals with value expressive argument yielded more favorable evaluations and were more persuasive. Persuasion is and continues to be a necessary evil. The persuaders in the play knew that all actions are to be turned towards changing attitudes and manipulating emotions. Crowds were persuaded so as to influence them and to be influenced over them. The crowd unknowingly played second fraught to the notion that they could be swayed in any direction in the presence of a powerful leader or orator. They demand that they need to be sensationalized, not sensitized. They constantly reiterated the idea who rules the Roman mob rules Rome, so as to make it universally acknowledged. Now let me give you some assignment. Question 1. Critically analyze Julius Caesar by William Shakespeare. You will answer this question in somewhat about 500 words. Question 2. What was Shakespeare's motive for writing Julius Caesar? What was Shakespeare's motive for writing Julius Caesar? Now that would be answered in 1000 words. And that is how we come to the end of this lecture. Talk to you next week. Bye for now.